if you ask me to whittle down a description of SABR to one single word, it would be community, because it's just really a place where anybody with an interest in baseball, whether working in a major league front office or somebody who just loves to get home after work and watch a baseball game and talk about baseball with their friends. We have all of those people in our organization among our members.
That was Paul Zwirecki, External Relations Officer at SABR. Hello and welcome to episode 135 of the Irish Baseball Podcast. I'm your host, Rick Becker. Zwirecki will be my guest on the show today. We'll be talking about analytics, history, and baseball in general. This is another conversation that was made available earlier in video form for members of the Irish American Baseball Society. Members of the IABS have access to our community network website, exclusive content, early content, and fun interactions with other members about baseball and topics surrounding Ireland. To join the Irish American Baseball Society, head to irishbaseball.org. Let's get started with our main topic. Thanks for joining us, Paul.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Rick.
So, Paul, when somebody hears the title, External Relations Officer, what does that entail?
Yeah, so it's a new position at SABR. It was created about a year ago. I'm the first person to hold it. I started in February of 2025. And the job and the goal of the kind of position is just to help connect SABR with other organizations like the Irish American Baseball Society who have a similar affinity for baseball and alignment with what we do, and try to find ways for us to kind of work together and collaborate to meet our respective missions. So most of my day is spent, making connections with colleges and universities, whether that be their departments that might be involved with sports management or sports analytics. Obviously, analytics is a big part of what SABR does. But it's not just that side. It's also a lot of history, American studies, and trying to find ways for us to work with students and faculty who are doing research that involves baseball in some way. It doesn't necessarily need to be baseball research, but research that can use baseball as a lens through which they're developing some knowledge.
And you talk about the analytics, and I think that one of the things that happened with the analytics explosion of the early part of the 21st century is that it developed the name sabermetrics. Yeah. So SABR has been tagged as almost being an organization of people who just want to sit down and calculate WAR and XFIB, but that is far from all that you do at SABR, and a lot of the focus is on history. And I have talked to a lot of quote unquote old school people who are part of SABR who, do like the bunt, do like some of these other things that have seemed to disappear from the game because they're interested in researching older players or things like that. Do you think that the history mission of SABR has kind of been buried a little bit because of the term sabermetrics?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, it's probably one of the biggest misconceptions about SABR that it is strictly analytics. And you're absolutely right. I mean, the term sabermetrics has entered the cultural lexicon here. We have Moneyball, book and movie probably to thank for that. And I mean that sincerely because it's a good thing that more people know about this. But yeah, I mean, the organization, while, has sort of lended its name to the sabermetrics movement, I think really more of our members and more of sort of our output as an organization is related to preservation and history and just studying the past and current cultural impacts of the game. I have to say we don't have an analytics side. We obviously do. We have a big analytics conference every March, which features cutting edge research done by students and others, really developing kind of the newest statistical models, which are, meant to impact the game today and give teams competitive advantages. But for that event, that's a single event in March. We have, 4 or 5 other events throughout the year, including our big convention every year where the feature is on history and sociology and every other way in which you can use baseball, as I said earlier, as sort of a lens or a medium through which you can study any number of topics. But yeah, there's I'm a historian by training, so this place has felt like a very natural fit for me as someone who studied 19th century religious history for his dissertation.
And I think that one of the misconceptions people have is that the analytics don't help us get a better view of old school baseball and early baseball. For example, I recently talked to a gentleman who wrote a book on Danny Murphy of the Philadelphia A's, not Daniel Murphy of the Mets, but it was kind of an obscure baseball player from the early part of the 20th century. And it was the dead ball era. So when I was doing research for that interview and I could look at his stat page, but he would have 4 home runs, 6 home runs. Like, it wasn't giving you an idea of how good of an offensive player he was. But then I could look over at his OPS plus and see how he was hitting compared to other people in his era. So I think that sometimes the analytics help the history aspect because you're able to say, well, if I look at a guy who's hitting 260 and he has 4 home runs, I don't think this guy's a good offensive player. But if it's 1904, he might have been a really good offensive player.
Absolutely. Yeah, so there's the whole sort of genre of statistics, like weighted stats, and you referenced OPS plus. There's all a number of ways in which these kind of advanced analytics give us ways to contextualize stats over time, which stats on their own, they're a picture, right? And giving these kind of weighted stats is maybe more of a video, right? In the sense that you kind of have a better sense of where, as you said, a player's statistics from 1920 fit in compared to a player from 2025. The founders of SABR, there were 16 of them who originally founded the organization in Cooperstown in the early 70s. The name they gave themselves, or was given to them, was they thought of themselves as statistorians. So they were trying to go back, and stats were a big part of it, right? But they were also just trying to fill in the gaps that existed in the records of baseball. I mean, it's I think harder for us to imagine now in 2025, almost 2026, when we have all of this data available to us. But baseball statistics were not kept in a uniform way throughout the history of the game. The RBI wasn't an official statistic until 1920. It's not to say people weren't counting them. They were just kind of amateurs who were doing it and keeping track. And then eventually it became adopted as an official statistic for Major League Baseball. So, I mean, SABR was really created by people who understood that there was an absolute link between the numbers of the game and the broader historical context of the game. And that's really what SABR, I think, still is today. And again, it comes back to that maybe misconception that's out there that it's that we're purely a statistical or analytical organization. It's a big part of what we do, but from the beginning, it's always been about the sort of linkage and the context between history and numbers.
One of the things I always think is funny when somebody will say, and it happens online all the time, oh, WAR is a made up stat. And it's like, well, you understand, like, batting average doesn't grow on trees, right? Yeah. Like, somebody made up batting average at one point as well.
Up, right? Yeah.
Right. So I want to move on to the history aspect here. And SABR does a great job of going back and looking at older baseball players and preserving their history, not just their statistics. And you have a lot of involvement on that side. And we're about to hit the 250th anniversary of the United States of America here on the Irish Baseball Podcast. We're trying to highlight the Irish immigrant and Irish American impact on the country. And I don't think there's anything that represents the United States of America more than the game of baseball. And when you look at the early days of baseball, I mean, even through today, but when you really look at the early days, it was a lot of Irish immigrants. It was a lot of Irish Americans. So could you talk a little bit about that Irish influence in the early years of professional baseball?
Yeah, well, let me start with the caveat that I am no particular expert in that subject, but you're absolutely right. I mean, we have a committee of experts on, say, 19th century baseball who would probably be the absolute best people to talk about this. But undoubtedly, as baseball emerged as a professional sport, and even before it was technically professional, we're talking about the 1820s, 30s, 40s, 50s, which of course is the exact moment when, huge numbers of Irish immigrants are coming to the United States. So it should be no huge surprise that there's, a big Irish and Irish American influence on the early game and still today. I think of players like Connie Mack, or I should manager like Connie Mack, right? Or King Kelly, who I know a little tiny bit about strictly because he was from Troy, which I have a personal family connection to that area. So, and he was not Irish born himself, but I believe Irish born parents. So some of the earliest and biggest names in baseball are Irish players, and I realize I'm preaching to the choir here, but yeah, I mean, there's undoubtedly a huge influence from Ireland and Irish Americans on the early game. We have, you referenced kind of what SABR does in terms of trying to go back and create, not create, but tell the histories of as many players as possible. One of our big ongoing and ambitious projects is the SABR Bio project, in which we are attempting to write a biography for every single person who played professional baseball. We have tens of thousands of them on the website now. Always more to be written, though. So I'll maybe make this as a plug to your members. If you're all aware of somebody with an Irish or Irish American connection who deserves a biography and you don't already see one on SABR.org, let us know. Volunteer to write one.
Yeah, that is a great point, because as we are trying to preserve the history, it's not just, the 250th and we talk about it, and then when the calendar turns to 2027, we forget about all this stuff again. Right. It is important to make sure that, we have, with the Irish American Baseball Society, we have Irish language lessons. We're trying to preserve the language. We have, Irish bands that we're trying to promote the music. All of this is part of preserving the culture, not just Irish culture, but Irish American culture, which is a distinct culture in and of itself. Sure. So that's a great point about, they always said, if there's a book you want to read and it doesn't exist, then you have to write it. So if there's a biography of somebody and you haven't seen it, even if it's just a page, even if it's just a long paragraph, get in touch with SABR and put that together, because in every little town, in every small city, there are baseball players who are local legends.
Absolutely.
Who aren't national legends. So get that stuff in there. What is this process like as you try to collect all of these different stories? Are you relying a lot on just everyday people to go and do the research? Do you just go through old box scores and go, who the heck was that guy? Like, what is the process of trying to collect all these biographies?
Yeah, so the Bio Project was actually created by our recently our former board president, Mark Armour, before my time at the organization. But there's a small sort of committee of folks who are kind of in charge of steering it. But SABR as a whole is a member-driven organization. I mean, we have 7,500 members, international members, primarily in the United States, but not exclusively so. If you ask me to whittle down a description of SABR to one single word, it would be community, because it's just really a place where anybody with an interest in baseball, whether working in a major league front office or somebody who just loves to get home after work and watch a baseball game and talk about baseball with their friends. We have all of those people in our organization among our members. So they're the ones who are driving the Bio project. They are the ones who let us know who needs to be there and who isn't there. And yeah, the actual process itself is, SABR members can contribute to the Bio project. They reach out to the person who's currently coordinating that to get assigned a biography, and then they go and do the work, right? They do the research, and that's why one of our key pillars of membership is that we try to offer as many research resources as possible, so folks can go and access historical databases, newspaper databases, and places like that to actually go conduct, really, really deep and really good historical research to meet this goal of eventually, as I said, having a biography for every single person who ever played professional baseball.
And as somebody who has master's and doctorate degrees in American history, so you focused on American history as a broader topic, but where would you say baseball falls into that broader topic of American history? Because I feel like baseball has its tentacles almost everywhere, from the Civil War to
Yeah,
obviously race relations through Jackie Robinson and integration. And you have, coal miners who worked in the mines and then went out and played semi-pro or professional baseball. It's every aspect, from the Civil War to Reconstruction to World War II. Baseball has just found itself ingrained into society.
yeah, and even further back than that, I mean, there certainly were some forms of what eventually became baseball being played even in the colonial, era before there was a United States. So in some ways, the game is older than the country itself, or to put it a different way, it's been here as long as we have as a country. So I think the maybe response I would make to that question is just that, again, baseball presents so many different opportunities, and you've enumerated many of them in the question, for people to study any number of historical topics relevant to the United States. The first one that comes to mind is probably very obvious, but if you're a labor historian and you want to talk about the history of union versus management in some way in the United States, you can look at baseball from literally the first professional teams, right up to today, and relevant in the news in the next couple of years, about how labor and management have interacted with one another, at times working together, at times not exactly on the same page. But you can do that through baseball, right? You can look at strikes, you can look at contract negotiations, you can look at free agency, you can look at the reserve clause, going all the way back to the early 20th century. Race relations, again, baseball again just provides a sort of perfect medium, for someone to kind of focus in on exploring topics if they're interested, in that part of American history. But obviously, it goes beyond that. I think it would be probably difficult for us to sit here and try to imagine a topic in American history or American culture that you couldn't in some way go back into the history of baseball and use it as a lens through which to explore the topic.
And as somebody who works so much with SABR and is so ingrained in the day-to-day operations, and you did mention labor strife, and there's a very good chance there could be a lockout, or there's definitely going to be some contentious conversations happening after the 2026
Yeah.
season when it comes to a new collective bargaining agreement. And one of the things about SABR is it started as an organization of baseball fans and, collecting stats, collecting history, but now it is sort of meshed into the collective bargaining agreements. It has become a part of negotiations. When players go to arbitration, they're pulling out a lot of stats that exist because of SABR. They are going back and looking at different research from SABR to say, hey, I deserve X, Y, or Z. And then the teams are coming back and saying, well, you only deserve X, Y, and Z because of this. How crazy is it that this organization that was started by fans is now actually a part of the game, and how players get paid and how people negotiate labor?
Well, I mean, yeah, it's in a sense sort of what you want to, it maybe speaks to the quality of the work that has been done by generations of SABR members, whether it be the historical or the analytical side. The fact that these kind of advanced statistics have become such a big part of the professional game. It's, I think if anything, what SABR members hope to do is to create new knowledge about the game, right? That may be writing a biography for a player who doesn't have one, and it may be, as we've said, developing a new advanced statistic or metric that can be, of use to a major league front office or to a player, right, to go and negotiate their contract. So, it's important for us to, advance knowledge about the game, preserve the history of the game, and really just encourage more people to be, interested and invested in the game. Um, Sometimes that means getting a group of people together at a local library to hear a history presentation. And if you're right, maybe it also comes up at the negotiating table between a player, an agent, and a team.
And I can also think of another area where SABR has had a huge influence, and that would be in the voting for the Baseball Hall of Fame.
Mhm.
And I think there are some players just recently, I'm going to point to Dick Allen. Dick Allen was a player who I have been screaming from the rooftops needed to be in the Baseball Hall of Fame for years because he put up these monster numbers. And I think he was unpopular among a lot of sports writers, a lot of the old school sports writers. But now people see his numbers, they're able to contextualize some of that,
Mhm.
and they were like, he belongs in the Hall of Fame. I think Burt Blyleven is another player who was really helped by the analytics to see, okay, this guy might not have the win-loss record that we associate with somebody who should be in the Hall of Fame. But when you look at things like run prevention, he was right up there with the best in the game.
Mhm.
Is it sort of, I don't want to say relieving, but is it kind of make you feel good like some of these guys who might not have gotten the recognition that they deserve are now finding their way into the Hall of Fame? Someone like Dick Allen, it was too late for him to see it, but for
Yeah.
somebody like Burt Blyleven, it wasn't.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's most of our members and myself included. I think we all feel good in the knowledge that we are, again, hopefully creating some new knowledge, advancing the way people think about the game of baseball, and hopefully leading to more informed decisions today, whether that be for the Hall of Fame or, as we were saying a few minutes ago, contract negotiations, or again, from more my perspective, I'm all about, creating new historical knowledge, giving us broader context for what's happened in the past in order to understand what's going on today. So I think that's one of the real driving motivations for a lot of our members are most actively engaged in research. Again, not all our members are here because they want to do research. A lot of them are here because this is, a great community to just be around other real baseball fans and talk about the game and go to games together and, enjoy the community aspect of what we do. But yeah, I mean, I think it does feel good to know that, the work that has been done by, again, those who came before us, and those who are still with us today, is having a meaningful impact.
And you mentioned working with colleges specifically. And I know one of the things that I really wish would have happened when I was younger. And, I had teachers that would say in school growing up that, oh, you worry too much about baseball, like you talk about baseball too much. And so few people get to play Major League Baseball. So you're going to want to focus on other things. Like
Yeah,
the odds of becoming a baseball player are super rare. And I wish
yeah,
that somebody would have sat me down at the time and said, yep, the odds of playing Major League Baseball are pretty rare, but
hmm,
they need scouts, they need broadcasters, they
yeah.
need box office representatives, they need people in the front office, they need people to do math. And are you finding that dealing with colleges, you're saying to a lot of these younger people, like, there's a lot to be done in the game of baseball, and there are a lot of ways to turn this love of the game into a career or even a hobby, even
Oh
if
yeah,
you can't throw 100-mile-an-hour fastball, you
yeah,
can crunch the data. You can do something else in the game.
Right. Absolutely. Yes. I mean, some of the, I referenced, we were starting to build some relationships with sports management departments, sports analytics departments, kinesiology, biomechanics is kind of an emerging area that we're getting more and more involved in. So there's not any number of ways that that people can get involved professionally with baseball. I don't want to, baseball is still a very, very, very difficult industry to crack into, even if you're not a player, right? It's a very, very competitive field, especially if you're going to try to go work for a major league team. But you can do that kind of work, if we just want to say, say you're studying data analytics with a goal of being doing sports analytics professionally. All the major sports have some level of analytics, happening now. Big college programs also increasingly, if not full-on analytics departments attached to their athletic programs. At a minimum, we'll have, a staff person who's now designated to be kind of the analytics person. So there are any number of ways that you can do this work professionally. But also, as you referenced and I said earlier about our members, a lot of our members, the vast majority of our members, do something else professionally and do baseball research as a hobby, as a passion. And the skills you develop, whether it be historical research, data analysis, programming, right? I mean, learning how to program and code in R is the way that, most baseball statistical analyses are done. These are not skills that are strictly for baseball or sports analytics. These are skills that you can take anywhere in any field virtually. So, this has been a huge topic ever since I was a history undergrad. The job market for professional historians was pretty weak when I was coming out, and I think it's only gotten worse. And it's been 11 years since I defended my dissertation, and I was told 11 years ago the likelihood that I got a tenure track position teaching at a school was pretty limited, which is why I kind of found an alternate path. But the skills you learn studying history can be taken to, virtually any other field. And if you love baseball and you want to study history, it may be true that you're not going to end up with a baseball history job. I have like one of the very few of them in the world, I think. But you can take those skills, you can study baseball, you can use baseball as, again, this kind of medium. You could go write a SABR bio project, and in doing so, learn how to do primary source research, learn how to do analysis, and learn how to write do critical writing as a historian, and then take those skills and work in marketing. You may not do baseball day to day, but you could study baseball and then find a way to apply that to a career elsewhere.
And then just your personal story. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how you developed your love for the game?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tale as old as time. It really comes from my dad. Both of my parents were big baseball fans. But I think it really came primarily from my dad. He grew up in Western New York, outside of Buffalo, which is also where I live now. Obviously no major league team here, but when he was 9 to 10 years old, he would just kind of watch whatever games were on national TV at that time, and this was roughly 1967, 1968. And I've got a Polish American sounding last name, as you probably gathered, and so did my dad, and so does my dad. And he got really enamored with Carl Yastrzemski because there was another Polish American name that sounded like the kids in his neighborhood. So he became a Red Sox fan. And then again, it's the oldest story in baseball, but dad raised my brother and I as Red Sox fans. My mom grew up a Mets fan, so they had a little bit of disagreement there in '86 when I was 3 years old. But yeah, baseball was always one of my favorite sports. I never really played it, to be honest, other than like kind of t-ball and with my friends. I never played it at any kind of serious competitive level. Growing up where I did, you generally played hockey and football, which hockey was mine. But yeah, I loved baseball, and then, as I've referenced a couple of times, started to get pretty serious about studying history. First as an undergrad, and then took it through grad school to master's and a doctorate. And again, as I referenced earlier, after I was finishing grad school, I was kind of looking around for what the real world was going to mean for me after I left grad school, and managed to hook on working at a local historic site in Buffalo, where I was also in graduate school, the Theodore Roosevelt Inaugural Site, which is a historic house museum where Theodore Roosevelt took the oath of office in 1901. So I started working there, worked there for several years, and then eventually moved into a position at Indiana University with the Organization of American Historians. And there I was I basically managed our what we call strategic partnerships there. So very similar job description to what I do now, just a kind of different playground. I was mostly working with National Park Service sites and helping consult with them on history projects in national park sites around the country. So that gets me to February of 2025 when I joined SABR.
Amazing. I like to focus on, every once in a while, and at least every episode, giving something so the kids can be like, okay, like I can see this guy's path and he got to use his passion to have a career. So that was really great. I wanted to ask you a little bit about being a Red Sox fan and working for an organization like SABR, because I have worked in sports almost all of my adult life, and there have been times I was working for a Major League Baseball team. I was an usher. I was doing it part-time at nights, and I would work every game, and that team was not my favorite team. And every once in a while, my favorite team would come to town, and I would have to be there in the other team's garb, helping people, to their seats. And it would be, an extra innings game. The home team won on a walk-off home run, and I have to be there like internally angry. And so do you find that your fandom of the Red Sox influences you in your job, or are you able to just sort of go all 30 teams that don't exist anymore, like it's all equal, and when I'm at work, and when I'm watching a game at home, then I can put on my fan cap?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I will say, that there's 6 of us on the staff. We root for 5 different teams, and we're all very friendly about it. And it doesn't, we'll joke around. Our CEO is a Yankees fan, so he hired me nevertheless, and knowing I was a Red Sox fan. But it doesn't. Yeah, really doesn't have too much of a day-to-day impact. I mean, SABR's structured. We have there are 2 different organizing principles. We have regional chapters, so we have regions sort of geographically based, and then we have research committees, so topically based, basically. And those 2 things can overlap, and most SABR members are parts of multiple of each. So I mean, I think the day-to-day for me, I joined the Boston chapter just to keep up with what the local Red Sox fans are talking about as SABR members. But other than that, no, it doesn't have a huge impact on the day-to-day. Our work touches on every aspect of baseball, contemporary and historical. So there's no way I could limit myself to only thinking or talking about the Red Sox. That would be it would just be too narrow a focus.
If any of our listeners want to become members of SABR, how would they go about doing that?
SABR.org. They just go to our website, sabr.org, and there is a button right on there called Join, Become a Member. Membership in SABR opens up a lot of different opportunities. It's how you can publish in our bio project, on our website, in the Baseball Research Journal, which is our peer-reviewed kind of biannual journal. You also then get access to the member resources and a whole host of member benefits we provide. Access to historical newspaper databases. You can download free copies of every SABR publication we have. So there's a lot of good reasons to join, and we certainly hope that your listeners will consider coming to be a part of it with us.
I mean, if you are listening to us, you're interested in history in some form or fashion, and obviously you're interested in the game of baseball. So I think that this would be a great opportunity for many of our listeners.
Oh, let me say one more thing, because I'd be remiss if we didn't mention it. I mean, our 2 organizations are collaborating right now, and I referenced publications not that long ago. We do have a collaborative book project on the way. So I think the call for contributors to that is out right now, but you can certainly learn more about that through either organization. But we're really excited about this book that's coming out about Irish contributions to the game.
Paul Zwirecki, thank you so much for joining us on the Irish Baseball Podcast. I appreciate you being here.
Oh, my absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
As always, we will have another brand new episode in 2 weeks. Be listening on March 23rd, when my guest will be Ben Anderson, author of the McGonagall Chronicles. These books make use of Irish, Scottish, and Norse folklore to tell fantasy stories with the intent to preserve these traditions for future generations. I'm your host, Rick Becker. This has been episode 135 of the Irish Baseball Podcast.